Good afternoon, third graders. I am here to read you the next two chapters of The Absent Author. So we left off on chapter 6, and I'm going to continue to be filling out. I'm going to share my screen real quick. My suspects and clues list. We should be getting down to, there shouldn't be too many new suspects, but so far I've just put all of our characters. We have Mr. Paskey, and I've been adding in more information of why I think he's a suspect. Miss Higgins, Mavis, and Mr. Linkletter, and he is the person at the hotel who checked them in. So let's go ahead and just jump into chapter 6. Dink stared at Mr. Linkletter. No answer? Are you sure? Mr. Linkletter nodded. He looked puzzled. Perhaps he's resting, and he doesn't want to be disturbed. Can we go up and see? Ruth Rose smiled sweetly at Mr. Linkletter. Then we'd know for sure. Mr. Linkletter shook his head. We cannot disturb our guests, young miss. We have rules here at the hotel. Now, good day, and thank you. Ruth Rose opened her mouth. But, good day, Mr. Linkletter said firmly again. Dink and the others walked towards the door. Something smells fishy, muttered Dink. Yeah, Josh said, and I think it's that Linkletter guy. See how he tried to hide the register? Then he turned his back. Maybe he didn't even call room 303. Maybe he was warning his partners in crime. What are you suggesting, Josh? Mavis asked. Maybe Mr. Linkletter is the kidnapper, Josh said. He was the last one to see Wallace Wallace. A man wearing a red cap tapped Dink on the shoulder. Excuse me, but I overheard you talking to my boss, Mr. Linkletter. Maybe I can help you find Wallace Wallace. My kids love his books. Great, Dink said. Can you get us into his room? The man shook his head. No, but I know the maid who cleaned the third floor rooms this morning. Maybe she noticed something. With his back to Mr. Linkletter, the man scribbled a few words on a pad and handed the page to Dink. Good luck, the man whispered and hurried away. What'd he write? Josh asked. Outside, Dink said. So I'm going to add to my suspect list that this man in the red cap, because it's kind of strange that he went up to the kids and then just walked away. The red hat. I am also going to add why Mr. Linkletter might be a suspect, because he seemed fishy. And if you haven't heard that term before, when someone says they seem fishy, it means that they said something smells fishy, muttered Dink. That means something doesn't feel right to them. So he seemed fishy. He closed the register so they couldn't see it. And what would not tell them his room number. Okay. And then the man in the red hat, I'm not quite sure yet, but I'm going to say gave them a note. And that's all we know for now. Okay. Okay, outside, Dink said. They all shoved through the revolving door. In front of the hotel, Dink looked at the piece of paper. The maid's name is Olivia Nugent. She lives at the Acorn Apartments, number 4. Livy Nugent? I know her, Ruth Rose said. She used to be my babysitter. The Acorn is right around the corner on Oak Street, Dink said. Let's go. Soon all four were standing in front of Livy Nugent's door. She answered it with a baby in her arms. Another little kid held on to her leg and stared at Dink and the others. He had peanut butter all over his face and hair. "Hi," the boy's mother said. "I'm not buying any cookies, and I already get the Green Lawn Gazette." She was wearing a man's blue shirt and jeans. Her brown hair stuck out from under her Yankees baseball cap. "Livy, it's me," Ruth Rose said. Olivia stared at Ruth Rose, then broke into a grin. "Ruth Rose, you're so big. What are you up to these days?" "A man at the hotel gave us your name." "What man?" "He was sort of old, wearing a red cap," Dink said. Livy chuckled. "Freddie old? He's only 30. So why did he send you to me?" Oh, so now I have a name for him. Freddie Old is what they've called him. I'm going to add that in before I forget. Freddie Old. Okay. "He told us you cleaned the rooms on the 3rd floor this morning." Dink said, "Did you clean room 303? Livy Nugent shifted the baby to her other arm. "Randy, please stop pulling on Mommy's leg. Why don't you go finish your lunch?" Randy ran back into the apartment. "No," Livy told Dink. "Nobody slept in that room. The bed was still made this morning. The towels were still clean and dry. I remember because there were 2 rooms in a row that I didn't have to clean. 303 and 302. Room 302 had a do not disturb sign hanging on the doorknob. So I came home early, paid off the babysitter, and made our lunches." "But Mr. Linkletter told us Wallace checked into room 303 last night," Ruth Rose said. "Not the Wallace, the mystery writer. My kid sister devours his books." And if you're not sure that word devours, what it means is to devour something is they read a lot of it and they're reading it very quickly. Devours, you eat it up, you really like it. Dink nodded. "He was supposed to sign books at the Book Nook this morning, but he never showed up. We even saw his signature on the hotel register," Ruth Rose said. "Well, Wallace might have signed in, but he never slept in that room," Livy grinned. "Unless he's a ghost." "I wonder if Mr. Linkletter could have made a mistake about the room number," Mavis suggested quietly. Livy smiled at Mavis. "You must not be from around here, Mr. Linkletter. Never makes a mistake." "So Wallace signed in, but he didn't sleep in his room," said Dink. "That means someone must have kidnapped him before he went to bed," Josh said. Livy's eyes bugged. "Kidnapped? Geez, Mr. Linkletter will have a fit." She imitated his voice. "We have rules about kidnapping at the hotel." Everyone except Dink laughed. All he could think about was Wallace's, his favorite author, kidnapped. Suddenly, a crash came from inside the apartment. "Oops, gotta run," Livy said. "Randy is playing bulldozer with his baby sister's stroller again. I hope you find Wallace. My kid sister would die if he doesn't write another book." They walked slowly back to Main Street. Dink felt as though his brain was spinning around inside his head. Now he felt certain that Wallace had been kidnapped. But who did it? And when and where was Wallace being kept? "Guys, I'm feeling confused," he said. "Can we just sit somewhere and go over the facts?" "Good idea," Josh said. "I always think better when I'm eating." "I'm feeling a bit peakish, too," Mavis said. "I need a quiet cup of tea and a sandwich. Shall we meet again after lunch?" Ruth Rose looked at her watch. "Let's meet at 2:00. "Where?" Josh asked. "Back at the hotel." Dink peered through the glass doors at Mr. Linkletter. "Unless Maureen Higgins and Mr. Linkletter are both lying," he said. Wallace walked into the hotel last night and never came out." Chapter 7. So what they're going to do is they're all thinking about all the possible clues. And luckily, we've been taking notes and we have quite a bit of clues here. So I just want to remind you guys, when we are reading mystery books, our whole point is to try to solve the crime before the detectives in the book do. We want to know first. It's kind of like a game. If you're playing Clue at home, that game, you want to figure it out before all the other people do. So that's why we keep updating our clues and our suspects list. Okay, so we're going to read chapter 7. Dink, Josh, and Ruth Rose left Mavis at Ellie's diner and then headed for Dink's house. Dink made tuna sandwiches and lemonade. Ruth Rose bought a bag of potato chips and some raisin cookies from her house next door. They ate at the picnic table in Dink's backyard. Dink took a bite of his sandwich. After he swallowed, he said, "Let's go over what we know." He moved his lemonade glass to the middle of the table. My glass is in the airport," he said. "We know Wallace Wallace landed." "How do we know he did?" Josh asked. "The airport told me the plane landed, Josh." "And Maureen Higgins said she picked him up," Ruth Rose added. "Okay, so your glass is in the airport," Josh said. "Keep going, Dink." Dink slid his sandwich plate over to his glass. "My plate is in Maureen's taxi." He put a cookie on the plate. The cookie is Wallace Wallace getting into the taxi. So what they're doing right now is they're reenacting where he traveled to by using glass and the cookie to represent him. Dink slid the plate over to the open potato chip bag. This bag is the hotel. He walked the Wallace Wallace cookie from the plate to the bag. Dink looked at Josh and Ruth Rose. But what happened to Wallace Wallace after he walked into the lobby? "I'll tell you what happened," Josh said. "He lined up 4 cookies in a row. This little cookie is Mr. Pansky. These 3 are Maureen, Mr. Linkletter, and Olivia Nugent." Oh, so we have another suspect. And here's our picture real quick. And I'm going to take a pause. I accidentally exited out of my suspects list, so I have to pull that back up. Okay. So my suspects list. Okay. Let's stop video real quick. And okay, so I have my suspects list, and I have the man in the red hat, so I'm actually going to have to make another slide so I can put in the new ones. So on this one, our newest possible suspect is Olivia Nugent. Okay, and we're not quite sure yet why she's suspicious, so we'll wait to add that in. Josh looked up and wiggled his eyebrows. "I think these 4 cookies planned the kidnapping together." Ruth Rose laughed. "Josh, Mr. Pansky and Olivia Nugent are friends of ours. Do you really think they planned this big kidnapping? And can you see Mr. Linkletter and my babysitter pulling off a kidnapping together?" Josh ate a potato chip. "Well, maybe not, but someone kidnapped that guy. Our trail led us to the hotel and then it ended," Dink said. "What I want to know is if Wallace Wallace isn't in his room, where is he?" Dink nibbled on a cookie thoughtfully. "I'm getting a headache trying to sort it all out." Ruth Rose dug in Dink's backpack and brought out 3 Wallace Wallace books. "I have an idea." She handed books to Dink and Josh and kept one. "What are these for?" Dink asked. "Josh made me think of something. Wallace Wallace wrote in The Mystery in the Museum," Ruth Rose said. "He said the more you know about the victim, the easier it is to figure out who did the crime. She turned to the back cover of her book. So let's try to find out more about our victim. Listen to this. She started reading out loud. When not writing, the author likes to work in the garden. Naturally, Wallace Wallace's favorite color is green. Fine, said Josh, but how does knowing his favorite color help us find him, Ruth Rose? I don't know, but maybe if we read more about him, we'll discover some clues, Ruth Rose said. What does it say on the back of your book? Josh flipped the book over and began reading. Wallace Wallace lives in a castle called Moose Manor. He looked up. We already knew he lived in a castle. I don't see any clues yet. Do you guys? Ruth Rose stared at Josh. You know, something is bugging me, but I can't figure out what it is. Something someone said today, maybe. She shook her head. Anyway, read yours, Dink. Dink read from the back cover of his book. Wallace Wallace gives money from writing books to help preserve wild animals that live in Maine. Okay, he gives money anyway to save animals, lives in a castle, and grows a bunch of green stuff. Josh said, counting on his fingers, still no clues. Josh took another cookie. But I just thought of something. He began slowly munching on the cookie. Dink raised his eyebrows. Are you going to tell us, Josh? Well, I was thinking about room 302. Remember, someone signed the register right after Wallace Wallace checked into room 303, and the signature was all smudged. And then Olivia Nugent told us that room 302 had a do not disturb sign on it, Ruth Rose interrupted. Livy never went into that room at all. Just then, Dink's mother drove up the driveway. She got out of the car, waved, and started walking towards the picnic table. Oh no, Dink said. If my mom finds out I'm trying to find a kidnapper, she won't let me go out of the house. Don't say anything, okay? Can't I even say hi? Josh asked. Dink threw a potato chip at Josh. Say hi, then shut up about you-know-what. Hi, Mrs. Duncan, Josh said, sliding a look at Dink. Hi, kids. How was the book signing? Tell me about Wallace Wallace, Dink. Is he as wonderful as you expected? Dink stared at his mother. He didn't want to lie, but if he told her the truth, she wouldn't let him keep looking for Wallace Wallace. And Dink had a sudden feeling that they were very close to finding him. We can't stop now, he thought. He looked at his mother and grinned stupidly. Dink, honey, why is your mouth open? Dink closed his mouth. Think, Dink, he ordered himself. Suddenly, Josh knocked over his lemonade glass. The sticky cold liquid spilled into Dink's lap. Dink let out a yowl and jumped up. Gee, sorry, said Josh. Paper towels to the rescue. Dink's mom ran towards the house. Good thinking, Josh, Dink said, wiping his wet jeans. But did you have to spill it on me? You had the whole yard. Josh grinned. Some people are never satisfied. I got you out of a hot water, didn't I? Right into cold lemonade, Ruth said. Dink blotted his jeans with a handful of paper napkins. Come on, let's go meet Mavis before my mom comes back. There's something weird happening on the 3rd floor of that hotel. And that takes us to chapter 9. So I'm going to stop right there and challenge you guys to fill in more clues and more suspects. We have a few new ones, as you guys saw, I added to my list. So you might have more clues and more suspects for the Diamond Mystery that Miss Waring is going to be reading next. Make sure to watch. There's going to be one more video about our lesson for this week, and it's going to be about how we make smart predictions in mysteries. Thanks.